What is up, everybody? We are back here at the Cinema Wave podcast here at the Culture Wave Media Network, and this is one that we've been waiting to talk about for quite a long time. It is the heat of the summer season. It is one of the most anticipated films of the year. It is James Gunn's Superman, the kickoff to the DCU. We have had a couple other projects that came before it, but this is the real cementing themselves, trying to compete with what Marvel has and Disney, and this is James Gunn's kind of first foray into this new universe that he's building, and it's starting and it's kicking off with Superman. This is a big movie. Very excited to discuss it with you guys. I'm going to be one of your hosts for this episode. My name is Darian Scalamoni. I am joined by Vinny Albano.
Hello, hello.
And Michael Peniston.
What's up?
This is kicking off our July of comic book entries, DC versus Marvel. Superman. This is obviously one of the most popular characters in history, one of the most popular American characters in history. And we haven't had a Superman since Henry Cavill's Man of Steel, at least a Superman proper movie. That was 12 years ago. And now we have James Gunn, best known for obviously the Guardians of the Galaxy franchise. And he also did The Suicide Squad. He's done Peacemaker. He did Creature Commandos. And he came on with Peter Safran to head DC Studios a few years ago, and to now kind of, again, relaunch DC as a whole new brand under his creative leadership and the leadership of him and Safran. So this movie's doing really well so far. It's already made, as of this recording, I think it made $220 million, I believe it is, which is very close to the production budget of the movie, which is $225 million. And there's a lot of heart to this movie. It goes hand in hand with what we usually know of Superman, but it is a different take, and it's one that people were somewhat nervous about because of James Gunn's sensibilities with comedy and things like that. But to open up this conversation, I want to touch on with you, Vinny, first, and then you, Michael, your broad thoughts on this movie without giving away any spoilers for anybody who is just here for kind of our early non-spoiler thoughts, and then they can click out and return back later when they see the movie. So, Vinny, starting with you, what did you think of Superman?
Yeah, I think this is the general conciseness. I feel like I have a very popular opinion, but I loved this film. However, it's not a perfect film. There's flaws. However, the Superman that shines here is so good. It's so fun. It's bold. It's hopeful. And it's filled with heart. And that's exactly what I wanted and what I was expecting from James Gunn and David Corenswet's interpretation of Superman. And they delivered. They checked all my boxes. And although at times I almost wish I was more surprised, like I almost wish there was a box that I didn't know that needed to be checked, it did check all my boxes. So not perfect, but one hell of a ride, and I have nonstop been talking about it, and I want to go back and rewatch it, especially for a character that means so much to me. This film genuinely means a lot.
Absolutely. Michael, your first non-spoiler broad thoughts. What do you got?
Yes. I'm definitely on the same concise as I feel as far as this film. I feel like this is the best interpretation of Superman that we've gotten, coming from a big Henry Cavill fan. This film is just very fun. It's colorful. It's very hopeful. It's a way that I've never really seen Superman, even just like in this light. It just feels like something straight out of a comic book, which I know James Gunn is like. This isn't the first time we've seen this, and he's just kind of just keeping that record strong. I feel like David Corenswet, his performance in this is just it's remarkable to me. It's actually, funny enough, the first introductory performance for me, and I'm blown away. Likewise with Rachel Brosnahan. I thought she killed it as Lois. I'm trying to keep it very, very minimal with this. But no, I very, very broad thoughts. I feel like this was a great take on not only Superman, but just a take on establishing this new cinematic universe. And I'll leave it at that.
For me, James Gunn's sensibilities as a storyteller within the framework of comic book stories coming to life. I don't know if there's anybody else that could do it better than he has done it over the years. Starting with Guardians of the Galaxy 11 years ago as a movie that shouldn't have worked on paper, a movie that a lot of people deemed was going to be a failure, the first bomb that Marvel ever had. Shout out Scott Napolitano for being wrong on that bet with me. But that was a movie that a lot of people kind of was putting in their rear view before it even came out. Like, who's going to watch a movie with a talking tree and a talking raccoon? And it spawned into this massive thing. And there's a lot of other things that you've learned on this press tour with Gunn, like even things as little as like the creation of the Infinity Stones was kind of a James Gunn choice, which is so ironic when you think about the severity and the weight of what those Infinity Stones mean for the Marvel Cinematic Universe at large, and the fact that it's a James Gunn idea. And so I'm not going to lie, coming into Superman, I was a bit nervous trying to see, coming from that and seeing the humor that he displays in things like the Suicide Squad and Peacemaker especially, how was he going to be able to make all of that still work and fit and align within his view of Superman? And I was blown away. I think that there is so much that is so well done with this movie. I think that he is able to introduce a lot of characters within his universe, not in a way that feels forced, but in a way that feels like they're real supporting characters that mean something to the overall plot and the world that he's building. On top of that, the Trinity, the Holy Trinity of Superman, Lois Lane, and Lex Luthor are pretty spot on. Like, I don't know if they could have made better choices in terms of who they decided for the roles with David Corenswet, Rachel Brosnahan, and Nicholas Hoult. Yeah. And I'm just really excited to dive into this movie at large, talk about a lot of the spoilers of this movie, a lot of the ramifications for what is to come with this film. But in terms of the writing and the direction too, it's just, I really don't know if there's anybody that's better suited to creatively run a comic book driven studio other than James Gunn. And I say that as a huge lover of Kevin Feige and what he's established up to this point with the MCU. I just think that James has been such an avid comic book reader, and what he was able to do with this movie, you can see as someone who, I don't read a lot of comics, but I like to do my research in terms of how the stories relate into these movies and these television series. And he pulled from so many different reference points to bring it all together to make it into his own succinct vision while still sticking to things in the comics that have an emotional weight to a lot of readers and a lot of comic fans, to kind of have this, I don't like, this forward momentum. You know, it's something where you're so excited to see what they're setting up in a way where it doesn't feel like it's setting something up just for the sake of setting it up. It's more that this is the world he's building, and it's natural world building. It's not doing it for the sake of the audience, if that makes sense. But let's talk spoilers, because this is a big movie. A lot of people have already seen it opening weekend. There's a lot to discuss. So at this point, you got a little glimpse. If you haven't seen this movie, I think we would all recommend it highly. I saw it in a normal format. Vinny, you saw it
I saw it in IMAX.
And Michael, did you see it? What did you see it in?
I saw it in normal format.
Okay. For you, before we dive into spoilers, do you recommend this film in IMAX?
I totally do. I'm going to be honest. I am biased. I recommend everybody to see any IMAX filmed cinema in IMAX, because I feel that is the intended format that the filmmakers want you to view it in. I feel this pays off to the format pretty well. I love the sound. I also saw it at the early screening fan event, so that gave me, I think, bonus points on the theater experience. So for audiences at home listening to my opinion, yes, I am biased because I had a really good theater experience. I do think it is perfect for IMAX.
Awesome. And James Gunn actually said a lot on the press tour that he was really proud of the 3D IMAX cut that they had as well. I have not seen a movie in 3D, and I don't even know how long, but it's one that I might return to. I'm excited to see it in IMAX. But you heard it from Vinny, who did see it in IMAX, that if you guys want to see it in a bigger kind of theatrical experience, there is your endorsement from Vinny. But let's talk spoilers. Okay, let's jump into the movie so we don't have to hold anything back. one of the things that Vinny texted me early on after I had seen the movie that he was really excited to discuss was Lex Luthor in general. Nicholas Hoult's portrayal of this villainous character who we have seen multiple times on screen now. This is not the first interpretation we have seen. We have the obvious Gene Hackman from the 70s Superman. We have the aforementioned Kevin Spacey who portrayed the character. Jesse Eisenberg had an interpretation with Batman vs Superman, and then probably the best known on-screen Lex Luthor in live action might be Michael Rosenbaum, who did it on Smallville for a number of years. But Nicholas Hoult comes in as also somebody who was a finalist for the role of Superman, which is crazy. It was between him, Tom Brittany, and again, Corenswet, who gets the role. But he gets the role as Lex. Vinny, you were so excited to discuss him in this character. Even though this is a film titled Superman, let's talk about the villainous approach first. What did you think about Hoult's performance and Lex as a character in James Gunn's vision of this movie?
Again, I feel this is a popular, common opinion. Loved him here. He honestly, every scene he was in stole the show for me. And I think that's amplified by James Gunn's direction with the character. Again, I've heard this opinion said a lot so far, but I'm going to echo it because I truly believe it. And something that I love is that finally we're given a comic book movie where we could just hate him. We could just hate a villain who is just filled with envy and this seething rage. You know what I mean? I love that. Like he's such a hater. He's such a hater and he's not redeemable in any way, but he is still, the fact that it is so well done is likable from an audience perspective because we love to hate him.
Yes.
And he is a hater himself. And I love that. I love the seethingness of it. I love that it's not like, oh, this is a villain, but he's kind of good. So like sympathy, or he's just bad enough. No, he is bad. Great. Nicholas Hoult, I would have not liked to see him as Superman. I think he fits Lex Luthor here. I think he fits really well, actually. Because he just portrays him. I think just he is a great actor in general.
Yeah,
he's one of the
for
best actors of his generation. So throw him in any role, I think he does really well. Here, he pulled it off very well.
Michael, what were your thoughts on Nicholas Hoult's performance as Lex Luthor?
I definitely agree. I am a big Nicholas Hoult fan, and I feel like he always shines, especially in superhero films. Like I remember being introduced to him in X-Men, and so I definitely would not have expected him to be either role, to be honest. Like he's not my first choice, but that's why I'm not a casting director, you know. Like James Gunn's got it better, and so I was blown away by his Lex Luthor. What's it called? I had never seen Smallville, so I never got Michael's take on it, and I have seen obviously Jesse Eisenberg, and looking back on that, I feel like that was a lot more of like a Joker type performance than like a Lex Luthor type performance, and I don't even really know. Like I know DC like that. I'm definitely more of like a Marvel guy, and I come from like the same position as you mentioned, Darian, where it's like you try to fill in where you can with a lot of the DC stuff and just comic and everything. So I know of like from the comic his hatred, you know. I know it's like people like really milk that like no, like his hatred is like a different level of hate, and this is definitely the perfect example to show that. I feel like this like he was filled with a level of rage, and it's so funny coming off of the Kendrick Drake beef, because like there was a level of like hatred throughout that was like, dang, like how could you like just Kendrick, how could you hate the man so much? And it's like this, like I feel like complimented that so well because it was like, oh yeah, like this is Kendrick, and like I get him. And so like, but on top of it, it was just really cool and refreshing, like you said, Vinny, to like there's no like sort of backstory. You just kind of know like this man just hates him. It's like pure envy, and it's like with a lot of superhero movies recently, it's like there's like a lot of backstory that goes into even like the villain, or it's like a lot of superheroes, I guess mostly Marvel, because that's where we're coming from. A lot of it is like, oh, a previous superhero screwed this guy over and now he's a villain trying to screw everyone else over. Like, no, this just brought us directly in the middle of a story of a man hating like an alien, as he wants to put it. And so I feel like it was amazing. Nicholas Hoult shines in anything and everything. he could play any role, and this is again not a role I would have expected for him, but like definitely keep him as Lex Luthor and keep putting him in superhero movies, please.
Yeah, I'm glad, Michael, you brought up that whole point of dropping us in the middle of what this world is, and I do want to circle back to that after I just kind of give my thoughts as well on Lex. I think that you get a layered performance from Hoult, which I also think is important in the context, even though he is somebody that you hate. It starts to evolve over time as this guy who doesn't understand Superman and doesn't care to understand Superman and looks at him as an it, as he says in the film, to getting to this point of not giving a single shit about humanity to get what he needs to be the most powerful being in the world, regardless of what Superman represents to people. And we're going to get later into the conversation about Jor-El's message, because it's a huge shift in terms of what is common towards a lot of comic book stories and what we see with Jor-El. But even more so, like, there's a moment in the film, again, we're talking spoilers at this point, we already said that, so if you guys haven't seen the movie yet, come back. But I mean, him playing Russian roulette with a man's life, and being like, just killing him in 2 shots and being like, God, that went quicker than I thought, we gotta go get somebody else, is something that, like, it plays into the tendencies of the psychopathic nature that we've seen so much with Joker, but we haven't seen it yet with Lex, and it does exist within the comics that Lex can become that, just for the overall bigger picture that he wants to be bigger and better than what Superman represents for the world. And so I think that that's a big part of the reason why I think his performance sticks out so much, and there's so much imagery that you can pull from in how they crafted that with Hoult and his role. But I do want to go back to what you just said, Michael, about how what we know so much of as comic book movie fans and just comic fans in general is that, like, so, again, Marvel set the standard, right? They had this I was going to say DNA. That's not like a formula. They had a formula for how this was supposed to be done for a very long time. And James Gunn completely subverts that. And he does it by throwing us in the very beginning with an opening crawl, which I loved that they did this, where they kind of break down all in the rule of 3 of 3 centuries ago, metahumans came to Earth. And so these metahumans, as Gunn's going to refer to them, and we'll refer to them, I guess, going forward, understanding the lore of what this universe is, that superheroes and entities and intergalactic creatures have existed in this world for quite a long time. And we don't need the intros of Superman to Guy Gardner. We know that the Justice Gang is aware of who Superman is, and Superman is we even get to a point, to break it down even more simply, that, like, Lois already knows that Superman is Clark, which was an interesting choice, and that's not always the way that they go about things like that. So you touched upon it a little bit, Michael, but I'm curious on how that felt for you as a viewer, because we're so accustomed to getting the background and getting the origin and getting the build-up, that this felt something that it didn't hit you over the head with the exposition. They treated the audience with this sort of intelligence where you could piece things together and you could understand, oh, well, these characters already know each other clearly, because Guy Gardner's calling him Big Blue. He's calling him by nicknames, and they're aware of who each other is. So I'm curious for you as someone, because you said even, like, you're not a big DC guy. You didn't grow up a lot with kind of seeing as much DC stuff comparatively to Marvel. For you, for this film, in the way that they approached that formula and how they decided to kind of get that across on screen, how did you feel it was handled, and was there things that you wish they did better, or do you think it was handled perfectly?
Yeah, I feel like it was handled perfectly. I only know so much as far as this all, but I feel like just it's always better, just kind of like in any story, just kind of like throwing the character into, like, the midst of the battle and the viewer, and and just kind of like letting them figure it out as they go. I like how this all kind of like takes place in a short amount of time too. It's not like weeks long of like, or like the fact that they didn't even show like him like as a kid, like, or like start with that as like Man of Steel. You had like that whole introductory background where you saw he lost his dad and everything, and and this, I think that he used even storytelling and like filmmaking tools just to help benefit that, like those moments where you did see like his upbringing, where like, and like the effects in the end, you didn't have to just like throw it in your face like with a scene. It was just like, oh, like you can touch on these and little things like that. And so I feel like it made so much more sense. One thing that I have grown up off of was DC animated things and like the shows, and so I remember watching the Superman
Animated series.
the animated series, yes, and this it felt like you were watching an episode of that, like it just threw you kind of in the midst of like an episode in like mid-season sort of thing, which I appreciate because I feel like especially with superhero films, like sometimes you don't need all that bad story. That's where it gets all dragged out, and I feel like that's where Marvel's problem is. Another problem with Marvel right now, it's that you're too dragged out. Sometimes you just want to be thrown into, like I said, the midst of it all, the battle, and just kind of see how these characters pick it up. And so I appreciated that. I didn't even fully know, like I know of Hawk Girl, and I have heard of Mr. Terrific. I know from like other adaptations, things like that. I know there's different Green Lanterns, and I've heard of Guy. That's not I know mostly like Howell, but but the way that they were effectively still like just thrown in there subtly, and like as like you brought up supporting characters, but like still just like bringing you in the midst of them already having an established sort of like thing. Like a lot of the times, that's kind of how comics are. I feel like it's like the world's already set. We're just kind of like viewing it, and so it's like I don't know if we were gonna follow this new format and use it to even still push forward these stories the way he did, even with the ending that he brought into it, like so subtly that could tie us into the next film in this series of this universe. I don't know. I'm a big fan of this style, this format for sure.
Yeah, you read my mind. Yeah. I totally agree. And to anyone who opposes that opinion, I say welcome to comic books.
Yeah.
Because, like you said, Mikey, when I was growing up, right, and I was a drooling toddler and I didn't know anything, and obviously I'm tuning in, and that's how it is, right? You don't know, they don't tell you the backstory like every episode. You just tune in, and then you just get it. You just get it after a while.
Yeah.
And also, you don't need the backstory. Even in this film, you don't need the extensive, like you said, Mikey, drawn out backstory. Nearly everyone knows Superman's backstory. It is so iconic, along with the other characters featured in this movie, although not as iconic comparatively, but people know the backstories. We can just jump right into it. And if you don't, the film gives you the context clues. It basically directly tells you, like, oh yeah, I'm an alien, right? So without having to waste too much time. And again, if you don't know the backstory somehow, that's just how it is. There's so much other things to like, and eventually you will, that's just how comic book media is. And I think that's the beauty of comic book media, because you want to tune into something like, I loved how you compared it to the animated series, right? Saturday morning cartoons like Batman the animated series or Superman the animated series. You turn in and you have just like a fun, silly adventure, and that's it, right? You just want a fun little silly adventure, and that's what this film feels like. And I really love that. I really respect it. That's how. That's how I feel generally.
Not only that, I feel like even like with this business format too, and how it could be so much more effective as well. Instead of like throwing out these backstories in our face in the beginning phase of like establishing everything, it leaves room for him to now be able to do like a spin-off here, to do like a feature, like a solo, to do just like a solo, like a focused project on some of these characters. I feel like the Daily Planet, for example, there are so many characters that were wrapped up in that. Not once did we ever really get an introduction to this place. They kind of just threw us in there, and like that's so effective because you can now just kind of like slowly throughout the course of building this universe just tap into learning little things about these characters. It's from like a business standpoint, I can see how like this could push them even further as far as their future films and projects.
Well, I also love how it's something where it seems like what Gunn is doing also is that it's not, unfortunately, like how Marvel has kind of gotten into this trend of being like, well, we have to introduce a character in a television show to then bring them to the big screen. Like he's doing this new thing, at least what it seems like already, where like we saw in the trailer for Peacemaker season 2 that like Hawkgirl and Guy Gardner are going to be in at least a scene, at least an episode of Peacemaker. So we're going to see them again right away to show that they exist in this world. Peacemaker does have a small cameo in this film as well to establish that Chris Smith obviously exists within this world. I love how we get like kind of that throwaway line from Sean Gunn's Maxwell Lord, just kind of saying like Lex Luthor sucks, because it shows you again, just it gives you enough context to understand that this guy doesn't like this guy. And why is that? Well, we'll learn eventually. We'll learn over time. You talked about like with spin-off series, like James Gunn said in a recent interview with Wall Street Journal that the two characters that he is beginning to start to think about developing spin-off series are probably the two most popular characters in the film, in Mr. Terrific and Jimmy Olsen. And Jimmy Olsen could be a fronted sort of Jimmy and Clark sort of Daily Planet type vibe, because we don't get a lot of that in this movie, though I do think we get enough of it. And Mr. Terrific is a character, though, that doesn't have as much, I don't want to say doesn't have as much lore in the comics, but it's a character that's kind of underrepresented in terms of adaptation. And Eddie Gathegi does such a great job of making that character stand out, and Gunn does such a great job of giving him a platform, not only in terms of his acting and in terms of the way the character kind of comes across on screen, but he has his like Yondu moment, a lot of people are saying, like in terms of when he shows up to sort of get in the pocket dimension with Lois and kind of push the narrative forward. So I do like that he's already approaching things with a different sort of vision for what he wants to do going forward. I do agree with what both you guys are saying. I think that Gunn is such a comic junkie that he wants people to be able to tune into films as their own stories. He doesn't like, it's like picking up, like it's like going to a bookstore or a comic book store and just picking up an issue and being like, wow, this design looks really cool. Wow, this is really interesting to me. All right, I'll go buy this. I'll take this home. That's what he wants to do with all these different characters and all these different stories. And even the fact that we get like a Guy Gardner in this comparatively to where we're going to see Guy Gardner again in the Lantern series in early 2026, which everyone's like, this is a very rated R driven HBO True Detective series. That's going to be a very different vibe. And we already know with Clayface is going to be like a rated R horror movie that we're not sure if it's Elseworlds or it exists within the same world yet. And I think that that's a good thing. I think that getting that difference, establishing that early on with how he wants to do this in the universe, and establishing even his own way of how he wants Superman to be portrayed is important. And Superman, we haven't done a lot of talking about Superman himself yet, which is what I want to pivot the conversation, because Superman is a complicated character on screen. And he's a character that, like you said, you were a big fan of him. I grew up always looking at him as the more boring superhero. Admittedly, I'm sure I'll get ripped apart in the comments for that, but that was something that I always felt. And I had never seen the Christopher Reeve Superman films, but it was just a character that I was like, he just doesn't look as cool as Batman. And like, I'm just not really like into the way that he looks. And I like the good old boy. And it was a story I didn't really care about. And my only reference point really was Man of Steel, which I did enjoy for different reasons. But after seeing this movie, I have a much different interpretation of how I see Superman. I did see the Christopher Reeve documentary earlier or late last year, which was one of my favorite films of last year, and gave a deeper sort of sense of how Reeve viewed that character, and Reeve kind of morphed into a human version of what Clark Kent represented. But for me, I thought this movie did a really great job of establishing not only Superman and Clark Kent, but really Corenswet as this fully formed version of the character. For you, as someone who kind of has probably a closer attachment to this character, was this exactly what you wanted? Did you feel that we could have gotten a little bit more, or are you excited to see where we go forward with Corenswet?
Exactly what I wanted. Exactly. And to elaborate on that, when I was really young, my grandfather was the one that introduced me to the Reeves movies, because he was a big fan of Superman. And I loved Superman. But I admittedly, Batman was always my favorite, but I loved Superman too, and they were friends. Like, obviously there's interpretations where they verse each other, but at the end of the day, there's the Trinity. You know, Diana, Bruce, and Clark, they're all friends. So I loved Superman. I loved the Reeves films. And then actually recently, as I got older, I want to say junior, senior year of high school, I returned back to Superman in comic form. And as I get older, I appreciate him more, because he is a character for me that gets me, it genuinely gets me so emotional. Just the character himself, no matter the medium, animation, comic, or this film. Like, I was literally had tears in my eyes watching this film at multiple moments, because he is a character that cuts through any sort of dark, macabre feeling that I feel, right? Any character that just he is a character that just cuts through it all, cuts through all the bullshit, right? And he reminds you to smile, to be hopeful, and that there's a fight for a better tomorrow, and that there's good people out there. And James Gunn and Corenswet understand that, and they deliver that so well. And it's just that all those, I'm not even going to bash Zack Snyder's interpretation of Superman, because at the end of the day, he's a different artist, and he wanted to interpret the character through a different lens, and he wanted to interpret it almost as a god who was trying to revel with the idea of being a god, right, amongst humanity. And that's a valid interpretation. However, me personally, I connect more with just, especially now that I'm older, every year it just grows more and more on me. I connect more with just him being a symbol of hope, and him being a symbol of just, getting the cat out the tree, or helping an elderly person cross the road. He's a friend. Yeah. And that's one of my favorite quotes from the Reeves film, is that he's not only a superhero, but he is a friend. And they delivered here. And that's what I love.
Michael, what about you?
I definitely agree. I feel like I also was coming off of, my main, interpretation of his character, at least live action form, being, the Henry Cavill and what's it called?
Zack Snyder's interpretation.
Exactly. Yeah. Even just going, into that whole trilogy. I don't even think they really was a trilogy if you really want to count that. But like, that was what I kind of got, and it was so dark that like I always knew that Superman as a character stood for that hope, like you're saying, but I never really truly saw it, especially in those films. It was just like he kind of was more of just like this aura forming, like, like kind of in those films, in like a mist of a dark world. And funny enough, I also kind of attributed him to being a little more boring as opposed to then like a character like Batman, and I always attributed that hope with Batman more than with as a character like Superman, the hope and the vengeance for whatever reason, just because of his story and like losing his parents and everything. It was like so happy of a story versus like such a dreadful story, and finding how to like bounce back from that sort of thing.
He also was 100% human comparatively to like the alien sense that you get from Superman.
Yes, exactly.
I understand that part of it too.
Exactly, but I also always knew, like you said, Vinny, that whole argument of like Superman being like a god amongst humanity. And funny enough, I feel like this film and this gave me a new sort of view of this character. Of instead of being hope, like you said, I still see the hope in there, but he represents humanity, and like they really just kind of like showed this. And even in the hope, I can admit that there were a lot of moments that did shine through, where like James Gunn had him saving the squirrel in the moment, like something as little as that, like wow, okay, I wouldn't even think that they would put something in that like that in this film, but like no, like okay, like he truly cares that much, like about each and every little creature on this world. And so like it definitely gave me a new look on this character that I appreciated. I feel like, again, coming from a dark sort of telling of Superman, this was just so bright. And David Corenswet, again, this was my first time, being introduced to him as an actor. And I've heard great things about him in like Pearl and things like that. But there's something about him that's just so relaxing. I don't know if that's the correct term, but it's like an endearing sort of like, he can represent this sort of like Superman broad sort of like manly character, but also be so heartwarming, and like he can have that tone of voice, but still also like I don't know, it's still so nice, and it's again, it's something that like just coming off of what I've seen with this character, it's new, and so I definitely loved it. I loved everything about it. I loved not only that, but I felt like this was a true adaptation where we could see him as being Superman, because like, yes, all right, let me say that with a grain of salt. Let me say that we know Superman as being like this like invincible character. Everyone's always comparing every strong character to Superman ever, but I feel like we've never really gotten to see like the true test of that Superman ability in film. And we've seen him up against the test in certain like Zod, obviously in Man of Steel, like that. Like they destroyed a city fighting. Like obviously, like we know that he's invincible, but there were like little things in this film that they showed with this character that were like, oh wow, I wouldn't even think of him being invincible in that. Like when like the engineer like literally threw the stuff in his like lungs and covered him in that stuff, and he had to fly up and then like pull it out of his like something like that's like, oh wow, like that's Superman. Like who the hell is doing something like that? You know what I'm saying? And like even like the wind blowing, catching, which is I love that
scene's incredible. The scene where he's so angry flying. I believe he's flying to the Fortress of Solitude, right? And he's going through all the weather. Is that what you're talking about?
That wasn't the scene, no.
Okay, but sorry. That scene is also. I'm sorry to jump ahead. I thought that's what you were talking about.
No, that is a good scene. I was talking about when he saved Metamorpho's kid and Crypto from going in the black hole.
Okay, yes.
Which is also again just like, and that scene is also beautiful. The colors, and James Gunn does not miss with the score. I feel like we don't talk about James Gunn's scores enough, but I actively still go back and listen to the Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 1 score. Like not the soundtrack, the score. Yeah, the score, He is so something about that Superman score during that scene specifically when he catches Crypto and he lands, and it's just I don't know, but I'm like wow, again, like wow, like who the hell is doing this but Superman, So it's like there was something with this adaptation that I was like wow, like this is what Superman's definitely supposed to be, from the humanity point to just the invincible in this character, to just David Corenswet's his performance and his take on it all.
Yeah, I mean, you guys covered a lot there. Sorry, I don't have much. No. I'm glad you're passionate about the movie, but you should be. I feel very similar to what a lot of what both of you guys said. There's not much I can add in terms of the humanity part was a big thing that I was going to touch on. I think you hit it right on the head, Michael. I think if I could talk about some scenes in particular that maybe weren't touched upon where I felt similarly, I think that the scene in the context of the movie comparatively to in the trailer, I think the scene between Lois and Clark, well, I guess it's Lois and Superman having a conversation, plays way better in the context of the film than it did in the trailer for me. Because in the trailer, I was almost like, all right, we're kind of just seeing this emotional outburst from Superman. But I love how we get the context of also playing in between Clark being like, you can't say that. And then switching voices, even to being like Miss Lane, like talking like in his Superman voice, while still being endearing, which was a word you used, Michael, of just understanding what it is and trying to still have this point come across that the thing he relates to the most is the human element of who he is, even though he is an alien. He is someone that comes from Krypton. And it's within the context of that scene that it works. And it's also in a scene with Lex at the end of the film where we get this kind of wrap up and this conclusion that doesn't end in a fight. It's not something that you see in a lot of comic book films where it's like this giant fight between Supes and Lex. It's a conversation to where he's saying like, that's what you get wrong about me, Lex. It's the human elements of me that make me be able to do these things. Which I think also we'll get to, like, I don't have a lot of cons with the movie, but one of my unfortunate cons is the fact that scene gets broken up by Crypto, because I think Crypto is really great and he's used in the right spots in this film. But my worry with what James Gunn was going to do in this movie, at times, nowhere near as many as I thought, thank God, but there are times in this movie where humor comes in and it's like, we didn't need that. And that was a scene in particular. I was like, you just broke the tension of this great conversation between Lex and Superman that I didn't necessarily need. But I think that for all three of them, I think all three of them are great. We haven't talked a lot about Lois yet, but Corenswet's performance in particular of playing the duality of these two characters and still not getting, because we don't get a lot of the Daily Planet. We don't get a lot of Clark in this movie really at all. We do get a lot of Superman, but we also deal with the ramifications of this message that he gets from his father Jor-El and what that means going forward, about how he always felt that it was his job to come to Earth to save humanity, when in the real context of what this message is, it's a much deeper and darker kind of tone in which his father and mother kind of want him to go procreate to build this world of super metahumans. And humanity looks at him differently because of that. And he has to prove not only to the world, but also to himself that he is still exactly who he was raised to be with Ma and Pa Kent, where we also don't get a lot of them in this movie, but I think they're used perfectly in the context of the movie. And when we get to this turning point where he has, again, it's like you have the one interpretation of what his message from Jor-El had meant to him for such a long time, comparatively to the father that raised him, and what Superman represents to Pa Kent. I think that it's just, in terms of the context of how the film is structured, it's done in such a great way where you can see that duality of Superman and Clark, which is so important for the character. You know what I mean? Do you feel similarly?
I feel similarly. You put it perfectly, honestly. I really enjoyed Ma and Pa Kent's introduction. That was the moment where, honestly, I really started to like swell up.
Yeah.
Was him speaking on the bench, because that's super.
That is Superman.
It's the human aspects. You covered it perfectly.
Yeah.
Honestly, I have no other comment to add up to that. Yeah.
So but I want to talk about the Jor-El thing, because it is a big topic. Bradley Cooper, another James Gunn now stalwart since the Guardians of the Galaxy days, voicing Rocket. He comes in with this iconic role as Jor-El, previously played by Marlon Brando and Russell Crowe, like big actors. And Bradley, I think in his own right, has kind of gotten to this point, and James Gunn has talked about, where he wanted to cast an actor that he felt could walk in the footsteps of someone like Marlon Brando. So he obviously holds Bradley Cooper to high esteem. But this message, Michael, is so much more about that darker side that now Superman is going to have to reconcile with going forward. Yeah. So for you, again, and you don't have a lot of, again, the context of the comics, like I didn't know that was never a thing. I kind of had a suspicion based on what we had seen in previous interpretations of Jor-El that was new. Yeah. You know, that was a new twist that James Gunn kind of thrown in there. So for you, seeing that kind of play out, how did you feel about that and the way they handled it when the Justice Gang kind of adjusts and tries to like even have this conversation with Superman, like, is this real? Like this, and Mr. Terrific's like, yeah, like all the research I have, like that's not a doctored message. That's what your father meant to say. It's just we got the message completed and we got all the information. So for you, how did that play out for your reaction to it?
It was definitely new for sure. Like I had never seen, like you said, that interpretation of it. I don't know if it's something truly in the comics or if that's like a big like story point. But it was a brand new thing for me. I feel like it was important to do that just because, obviously, so like there is a level of like of fright that comes with knowing, oh, okay, this is still like a guy from another planet. Like we've seen and covered Invincible. We know how that can go. Yeah. Right? I completely. I really appreciated that. I appreciate Bradley Cooper. Who doesn't love Bradley Cooper? But it was a really cool take. But it was really cool also for me the way that in which it was done, and like you said, how the Justice Gang was decided to handle it. But even just again like the humanity in it, where like when that notice came out that Superman is bad, he came here and like they put it out. There was just some dude standing next to Superman that like gave him his phone, like, so there is still like a level of trust that you can tell is like here that like with all of these people, including the Justice Gang, hence why I feel like I appreciated their even kind of like walk, like, are we sure like mostly coming from Hawkgirl, because obviously the guy was like ready to fight Big Blue, but it was definitely a new interpretation for me. I appreciated it. I definitely think that little things like that aren't as little as they seem. And, I do think that maybe there is a way that,
role.
Yeah,
definitely going to play a role.
I don't know if it could be Zod. I don't know. Maybe you brought up Mr. Terrific not being able to decipher if it was like.
Oh no, he did. He does. Yes,
but it's to his knowledge, it seemed real. I feel like something from there would make sense for him to not be like Zod coming from Kryptonite. You know what I'm saying? Is like. maybe there's something you have like that's coming like that. I've heard even like people have thrown the name Brainiac out there. I don't know a lot about the character. I know the name, but like there are characters who could have
manipulated things.
So I think we'll see it again. Yeah.
Did you have something, Vinny?
No,
I'm sorry.
I was just saying.
No, but I liked also how it kind of portrays this nurture versus nature style of the Jor-El versus Pa Kent, and I think that it just does a really good job of keeping that open as something that's different that we haven't seen. Lois Lane. We haven't talked much about Lois Lane, so let's talk about the dynamic of Lois and Clark and Rachel Brosnahan's performance. I love the cheekiness between the two of them. I love how we have the tit for tat that kind of starts off in the beginning of the film, and we see her kind of coming to aid when it felt like nobody else could come to aid for him. So Vinny, again, a character that's very near and dear to your heart, such a big element in terms of the romance of Clark and Lois is splattered across every Superman comic, essentially. So how did you feel that the chemistry worked between Rachel and David?
I really loved it. It's very charming. It's very corny, but in a sweet way. I love Rachel Brosnahan as Lois. I just love her as an actress. She's great, and I think she fills the shoes of the character very well. I also love how James Gunn interprets Lois, because Lois is a very strong character. She is, I mean, even since the 70s in the Reeves films, although I would say she's portrayed more as the damsel in distress, especially during the climax of the Reeves film. But even then, she is a really strong character. She's so independent, and she's so fearless as a reporter. And we see that here. She's fearless. She goes out of her way. She takes initiative. She's not just, standing there or sitting behind her desk just waiting to be kidnapped by the villain. You know what I mean? And I love that. I love that she is a character of her own. I think she did great. Rachel and Gunn behind Lois here.
Yeah, definitely, for sure. I would agree. Michael, on top of the fact that we have the relationship between Lois and Clark, we also get introduced to the Daily Planet, and they play a very major role in this movie, even though they might not get a ton of screen time. We obviously get the introduction to Jimmy Olsen, played by Skyler Gisondo. We have Beck Bennett, who's in this film. We have Perry White, played by Wendell Pierce, and everybody's sort of playing their roles that are so iconic in the comics. So that dynamic as well for you, kind of seeing that newsroom kind of ensemble and see what they could add to the movie, and then again kind of playing a role in the larger kind of climax of the movie towards the end. How did you feel about that adding to the humor and just that side of Clark's story?
That was another thing I really appreciated with this film. I know that the Daily Planet is just a big thing, obviously. I mean, like, it's his job outside of Superman for Clark, and all these other characters in this world come from there. And so, first off, I feel like, yes, I agree. Rachel Brosnahan is Lois Lane. This was my first, again, performance. I know she's Marvelous Miss Maisel, I believe. Mrs. Maisel, but this is new territory for me as far as her acting, and I was a big fan. But everybody in the Daily Planet, I feel like they perfectly introduced them. Just again, like we spoke about before, like, just dropping us into this world with them. I feel like in the world of superheroes, journalism is probably so much more important than we realize. And just everywhere, what I'm saying? Like, you see that to a degree in some films and characters, like Spider-Man's, like, he does like the camera stuff.
Yeah.
Like, you never really explore that side of journalists that want to figure out what's going on with these stories. We're always just experiencing the story. So I don't know, to almost have like something from their point of view of being like them trying to uncover like something. And sometimes they do play a big role in the superheroes story, where it's like they will help give them clues and give them answers leading to like the solution. I mean, take a character like Batman, like that's fully investigative stuff right there. You know what I'm saying? So it's like, it's cool to see not only the investigative side of just the superhero world, but like a Metropolis version of this. It's cool. I think that when they got involved in it, that got really cool. Seeing Lois behind the wheel of Mr. Terrific spacecraft was really interesting. I appreciate all the characters though. I wish I got a little bit more screen time out of a few of them, but I think again there's so much room to bring them back for things like this. But shout out Jimmy Olsen, man. I'm a bit Skyler. Just Gisondo. How do you say one? Gisondo, yes. Yeah. And I know he's been in the game for a little bit. Funny enough, he's like, I think he was in Daddy Daycare. Like he's like been.
That's amazing. If he was, I know he voiced one of the puppies in one of the early Air Bud movies.
Okay,
I saw that in a film one, like when they were doing like a trivia challenge on YouTube for the press tour.
Okay,
so he's been around he's been literally acting since he was a child.
He has, and he always kind of plays this character where it's like, I wouldn't say Jimmy Olsen is like he has his own sort of suaveness, but he's like still like your normal average guy, and he kind of always plays. I don't know if you guys saw the show Santa Clarita Diet with
with Drew Barrymore.
I watched the first season. Yeah,
he's in that, and he kind of just again plays like that awkward sort of character. But to see like that character, but all the women flocking to it, like Jimmy Olsen, it's just so funny, and he portrays it perfectly. He was my favorite part personally of the Daily Planet, but I'm excited to see what else they do with that whole ensemble.
Yeah, I love how you brought up the journalism aspect of it too, because they really do play into it, even if it's these little things. Like one of the things, which I think again is a good transition point, one of the headlines on Lois's desk is this whole, I think it's like an expose or it's research into Simon Stagg, who in the comic books is a character that also kind of helps Lex sometimes, but he also is the reason that Metamorpho is who he is, which is a character in the film, played by Anthony Carrigan, probably best known for playing NoHo Hank and Barry, and also known as Element Man, who plays one of the roles as these other metahumans in the movie, which James Gunn introduces a lot of characters in this film, not only the Daily Planet characters, not only his new version of the three main players with Superman, Lex, and Lois, but we've already mentioned them at times during this review. But Mr. Terrific, we have Hawkgirl, and we have Guy Gardner as the Justice Gang, and then Metamorpho, who plays a very major role. And by the end of the film, he becomes a member of the Justice Gang. So, Vinny, I'm going to give you the floor to discuss any or all of them if you want, and we can kind of go around and see how do we feel about the Justice Gang and this sort of privatized superheroism that is being built, because they are, at least all of them besides Metamorpho, they are all wearing matching costumes, and they are run by a military, or I guess not a military group, but they're owned and operated by Maxwell Lord, who is kind of essentially just a little bit better Lex, kind of. He's kind of this rich asshole that kind of takes ownership of superheroes, and he's paying these people to clean up the city. So I'm curious on your thoughts on how Gunn was able to kind of introduce these characters within the context of his movie.
Excited to see where that leads us in the context of the universe that Gunn is building here, because you could go so many different ways. It could be really exciting. For example, I'm very curious how a Bruce Wayne may feel about this. You know what I mean? Or Batman, right? So I am very excited. Metamorpho and Anthony Carrigan as him was my standout. Was not expecting Metamorpho to be one of my favorite movies that came, or favorite characters that came out of this movie. Very charming, very sweet, very just, there's emotional vulnerability there. It builds a character very quickly. Also, a very visually exciting character. Super zany, wacky, weird. But again, this is DC. Which is something I do want to talk about before the end of the review, and how I think this is a lot of people's who are not familiar with comic books, their first real exposure to a real DC universe, because DC is a lot more zanier, wackier, mystical than Marvel's grounded approach, and I love that Gunn did a great job with that. Metamorpho is a perfect example of a character that did that. The Justice Gang too, very quick in the film. They're small parts, but Guy Gardner was perfectly executed. Hawkgirl definitely I got the least out of compared to the rest of it. Obviously, Mr. Terrific standout out of the three of them. Mr. Terrific is just an incredible piece of this film. He delivers the dry comedy very well and not in an annoying way. Very excited, honestly. I can't really say anything more aside from I love their inclusion here and I love what it means for the future of where we lead in the next few products that they'll come out with.
Michael,
Yeah.
what about you?
I definitely agree. I feel like this was a better introduction to a lot of these characters for me, this film. I definitely can see, like you said, Vinny, where this could go.
Yeah.
You know, a lot of justice. You know, we'll see. But it's cool to know also that there's already an established sort of group, if that makes sense. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's not like a brand new sort of thing. At least in this world, again, I'm coming off of the Marvel world where you had to build up to any sort of group effort or seeing like of teaming up. And again, coming off of comics again, which is another thing, like you have, that's like a super normal thing where it's just like they're already kind of teamed up, or it's like, again, in that world, they're already living there. You know what I'm saying? Like the argument of like in Marvel, like, oh, wait a second, this superhero was here when this movie was taking place. Like, you know what I'm saying? There's
an exact reference point that it happens in this film that includes the Justice Gang. That is such a throwaway scene, but describes exactly what you're talking about. And I'm so glad that Gunn did it because it could shut down every single person's anecdotal note, like nitpicky shit when it comes to movies, because it's the scene where him and Lois meet up. And as he calls it, it's an intergalactic imp that they're dealing with. So it gives the context of how it is regular in their world to have partaken or have these things occur. And the world within it, even with humans and citizens, are just like, that's fine. The Justice Gang will take care of it. That's all right. We have a government of people with super abilities that'll take care of that. And it doesn't lead to this thing where it's like, well, you know, if there was a conflict in a different country, the Avengers would be there. It's like they directly address that even in dialogue and at the end of the movie when they kind of split everybody up. So I'm glad that you brought that up because that's something that is so... It leads to so much commentary online and so many conversations about things that are such insane hypotheticals that we're never going to get answers to. Like, it's never like they're ever going to be like, well, or they will, and then it'll be shoehorned, and it'll be like, why are we spending so much time on exposition? Like, I don't care if Captain America was here compared to there. You know what I mean? Like, having that as an established thing. Sorry to cut you off, but I did like that was such an important scene to me in the context of the movie to establish exactly what James Gunn is trying to build with this world. And I don't have much to say. It also, I don't know if you had something to say too to that point, but it's so little of things like that is like so easy. Like a scene like that is so important. And I really did appreciate that scene, even visually, just to see like in the background.
You know, like them to have a normal moment, Superman having a normal moment, knowing that, oh, there's a whole battle, like a boss battle happening in the back. that's really cool. And it's something that's like really like subtly thrown in there, but you can appreciate. But another thing that was subtly thrown in there that it's like another establishment of like, no, like there's a world with this and they're all connected closer than you think. When you see the cars, like they're like evacuate the city, like and you see there's like a shot of a bridge and like people are evacuating. There's like those typical like exit signs when you're on a bridge. One of them is like a sign that says Gotham City, and you see nobody is driving into Gotham City, but people are like exiting. Like it's such a little detail, but it's so important in establishing that, like, oh no, like Gotham City, like Batman's like worst area is like right over here. You know, like it's like it's establishing that this is the world, this is the DC, and it's so also so spot on to things you would see in our world that it makes it almost more human. You know what I'm saying? It's like, oh, like, all right, let's take a left into Gotham City today. Like, and like, we're going into Freehold, New Jersey. You know what I'm saying? So it's like, I don't know. I just little things like that I appreciated, but I am very excited to see where they expand the Justice Gang, because there will definitely be expansion there.
Yeah, and I love that both of you guys brought that up because, like I was saying before, Marvel and DC, respectively, in their universes, they have their own pros and they have their own cons. But something I love about DC that Marvel doesn't have is, like I said, Marvel's grounded. It takes place in the real world. Spider-Man is from Queens. DC is a lot more fictional, a lot more mystical. And from that, you can really play into just like the comic bookiness of it. And you captured that perfectly. I love that even when we get the news reports of when the kaiju comes in and all that, there are some people that just like are sitting there. And then
in their office buildings.
Yeah. There's some people sitting there. There's literally people on the street just being like, oh, look at that. And then there's like other people running and screaming. I love that. I love that it's just so ordinary, like you said. It separates it from the competitor being Marvel. And also another key component that separates the idea of this mystical universe compared to the grounded Marvel universe is the idea of alter egos, right? The DC superheroes, they're built around their superheroes, their superpowers, and with that, secrecy. Everyone has an alter ego in DC. Marvel, before Superman, no one had an alter ego. All the Avengers are public knowledge. The event, like, everyone knows Tony Stark. The world and the public know their real identities.
Oh, wow.
And that goes on with a variety of more characters in Marvel, like Jessica Jones, like Luke Cage. The list goes on.
Yeah.
And I just love that they didn't have to spend so much time and bogging down the film with trying to force feed it. They just did it in such a blissful and simple way.
It works. It's just organic. It doesn't feel like I need to go back now and understand why the world is the way it is.
Yeah.
I'm just so okay with it. I'm like, oh, okay. So everybody knows about superheroes in this world. That's great.
Yeah.
Let's keep exploring that. What does that look like? And I don't even care about necessarily what it means for the citizens. But again, like you're talking about with the groundedness of what Marvel does and how they make things. Like, again, there's a big international conflict that happens in the middle of this movie with this fictional land of Baravia, and I love the scenes with the president of that country and what his relationship to Lex looks like for the political sort of intrigue and how Lex kind of wants to take over half of the other country, and I love how we get that context. But so much of it is understanding that this is a world where anything can happen, and Gunn does a great job of establishing that from the beginning. We haven't talked about, we're talking a lot of high praise for this movie, which is very deserved, and it's a great film. But we haven't talked any cons, and I don't want to speak ahead when we get to scores, but I don't think any of us would have this movie out of 10. Maybe I'm wrong, but there are some gripes that I personally have with the film. I am curious on what your guys' gripes would be on the film. The two biggest things for me is humor being in places where it doesn't belong. And as great as this movie is, and I've talked about a lot of things I like about it, and I do think that it's a film that does a good job with its runtime, I do wish there was more development in every facet, which is maybe I'm being nitpicky in terms of that, but it was like I wanted to see a little bit more of Clark and Lois. I wanted to see a little bit more of the Daily Planet. I wanted to see a little bit more of Ma and Pa Ken. There was a little bit more that I needed from everything, which isn't a bad thing. It means that I'm excited to see where they go. You know, it's more that I'm excited to kind of see where they go, but I think this movie would have benefited from maybe an extra 15 minutes of runtime. That would have made the movie 2.5 hours long. But there's a lot that James fits into the movie where sometimes it feels like we're jumping to a lot of different things, right? We've already mentioned how many characters, 10, 12 characters that are significant parts of the film, on top of the fact that it is a superhero movie or a Superman movie, and we're establishing all these new characters in a universe. So those are my two gripes with the movie in terms of humor. The crypto thing I brought up, the Mr. Terrific garage scene I think is so stupid and so unnecessary and stalled the movie. Which again, nitpicky, one joke, but something that comes in where I'm just like, we're wasting 30 seconds on a garage door being lifted for a joke that has no good punchline. So those are gripes for me. And in terms of kind of, again, just the sensibility of wanting to see more. For either one of you, either one can start. what are things that you wish they could have executed a little bit better with this film?
Yeah, so I'll tackle both of what you said because I feel similar.
You don't have to have the same gripes as me, by the way.
No,
Those are just my
I
gripes
feel
with the movie.
similarly, but in a more, I would phrase it differently.
Okay.
When it came to the development, I was fine with this because it's still an introductory. It's still, I love the idea of it just being a Saturday morning cartoon episode.
Yeah.
Right. So when it comes to the word development, I almost like, I'm fine. I'm content with how the film is. But going back to what I said about the film checking my boxes is that it checked all my boxes, but I feel like we're coming from the same kind of feeling here, but using a different word is that I just wish that I wish I had a moment in this film where I went, like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I wish I was a little bit more.
Well, you had said surprise earlier on.
Surprise, yeah. Or I don't know. It gave me everything, but
You wanted more.
I wanted a little bit more. But then again, it checked my boxes, so it's solid. Like I can't even complain there, right? About the humor I want to tackle too, is I feel the Superman comic books are so zany. All-Star Superman by Grant Morrison is a zany author, and I love that Gunn understands the zaniness, the comic bookiness. I do agree though, there's some jokes where I appreciated the comedy. I appreciated the comedy when it really existed within the world. The secret harem was pretty funny. However, the garage, definitely agree with that pacing, and the crypto joke at the end, where I agree that I talked with Nap about this, and Nap said that he felt that scene was very cathartic, which it is, because I love, seeing fucking piece of shit getting thrown and thrown by the dog. It's like, yeah, that's funny. It's cathartic. But I agree with that, but I also agree with what you said before of how humor like that kind of lessened the punch for
it's
me.
the context of the scene.
Exactly. Like I wanted that dialogue between Lex and Superman to go on a little bit more. I wanted it to just stretch it out a little bit more. Like obviously we didn't need it, and if Superman punched him in that moment, right, there had to be a tension breaker of some kind, because Superman couldn't have gotten to the point. It just couldn't, right? That would break the film. So we needed a tension breaker, maybe crypto, but I just wanted that tension to be a little bit pulled more. Tarantino always uses the analogy of pulling the rubber band and then snapping it. And the other thing I wanted to address was the visual clarity of the film. Or sorry, I should say the visual identity of the film, which is... this is more of a cinematography thing. I'm just not a fan of the visuals of the film. There's moments like in the pocket dimension, beautiful, beautiful. But overall, and I love the film, I just am not a huge fan of Chris Braham. I was trying to pull up his name. I believe Chris Braham was the cinematographer, and I've seen the other films he's done, and he's done Guardians, he's done Flash, and I love Guardians, and I don't like the Flash. But the cinematography is not the highlight for me in Guardians, and same here. I'm not just a very big fan of the visual identity or the color grade of the film. Just has this weird kind of, I can't even describe it, video game look. Then again, everything else makes up for it. Those are my big cons.
Okay, Michael.
Yeah.
Any cons?
Yeah, I have a few. I'm also going to touch on what you guys said because again, it's similar. But, developmental sort of cons, not so much, I'd say, just because I agree. I feel like a part of me did want a little bit more. I remember, it's funny, a lot of my cons I were similar but they've changed in the past couple of days because I've thought about it a little bit more. I did at one point want a lot, not a lot more, but at least a little bit more from, like you said, like Clark and Lois, and like these little things like the Daily Planet, and like little things where I was like, oh, like they underutilized this, or like, oh, like I wish they established this a little bit more. But again, I feel like it's perfectly setting up more that we don't really know what
It sets up a lot, this movie.
A lot.
Yeah.
Not only that, but I had to kind of take a step back and look at this film and compare it to like an Iron Man film, where it's still like, granted, he already has released films in like this universe that will still play into it, but this is like technically like still like their establishment film. And Iron Man, if you think that was a great film and established a lot, but it still was also like its own consolidated thing, and it didn't reveal too much as far as that character and like more to play out. And it's also a still young version of this Superman, and so there's definitely a lot of room to grow with these characters. So I don't know if that's too much of a con. It was a con for me. I still wish we got a little bit more, but I'm not that too gripey with that. I feel like the comedy thing I knew was definitely going to play into this. That's just James Gunn. I feel like I wasn't too worried. I knew there was a chance it could get too corny to a degree, but I don't know. I think I view James Gunn corny. I view his style as having like that, like it's good for like the corniness that's in it, and it's just attached to it. So I think that I just kind of, it's something I expect now, you know, like the comedy sense, but also being filled with heart, being filled with drama, and like being able to somehow at least, you know, like all of them substantiate each other. But I just made up a word, I think. I don't know if that's a word, but and it's specifically to the crypto scene, because this will lead into my con. I appreciate that last scene. I do wish we got more of like a conversation beat between, like, you know, Lex and Superman. That could have been cool. I think that the way that they did it, they cut it off in enough way where his rage could still be so filled that he could come back at some point and do something. And that's another developmental thing where we could get multiple monologue moments between the two of them. So I'm not too worried about that. I do think it was a cheap way out as far as crypto. But then again, I took a step back. I had to think about it, and I was like, wait a second. Superman would not have punched him in that moment. It just did not go with his monologue, and that man needed to be punched.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Sort of thing. And that was like the best way to do it. But it also made sense with Crypto's character after then getting the last scene that we got, and like knowing like, oh wait, it's just like, it was just like a dog thing, and it just was like the right time, you know. So I that could just be justifying it, I don't know. But that leads to my gripe, and I was one thing very, very worried was with Crypto in this film. And I was excited obviously that we were even getting Crypto, and I feel like James Gunn always does any animal in his film justice and well. Going back to Scooby-Doo, man, like he's always doing God's well. I was just worried that Crypto was in some way going to be used and like take a shine away from David's performance as Superman. Likewise with all of the characters, that was a worry going into this film. I think that the Justice Gang was used effectively and properly, even if I did want a little bit more of them. But I still feel like they utilized Crypto too much, in my opinion. I know that in the comics, that's their thing. They're a duo. They fight battles together. Crypto, you know, is like the assistant, I guess you could say, and a lot of those roles in those boss battles with Superman. But I was worried that they were always going to throw him in there, and I feel like they did use him as a sort of cop-out way multiple times, where Superman would be fighting somebody and he'd be like, oh, you didn't think about this though, and then start whistling, and then like, oh, here we go, Crypto's back, you know what I'm saying? And then like even like that Ultraman fight, I feel like the choreography with David and David was like really good. Like that was a lot of like where we saw like the best moments of his Superman in that fight, and with the Raptors. But again, it was like a moment where it was like Crypto had to come in and like had to like destroy every little camera. And again, that's not the worst critique. Like that's what Crypto is there for, again, to like help in those moments. But again, I just feel like we kept going back to like that whistle, or we kept going back to like crypto, even in like the black hole scene. Like crypto didn't save the day necessarily, but he like tried to use him as like a crypto, come save me, da 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 da. You know what I'm saying? Like it was always going back to that, even if he didn't do that much. And I'm a little worried seeing that now that he's Supergirl's dog. I'm excited to see him in the film because I'm sure he'll be in Supergirl, knowing that that's the next film. But again, I just don't. I want these characters to still be able to be flushed out without the sake of undermining them or like using cop outs with them when we could see the fullest of their potential. And I don't know, maybe that's done intently because he doesn't want them to have their fullest potential just yet. He wants these characters to grow, so he wants like a character like Crypto to help in those moments. But again, to me, in this film, I felt there were a few times where I was like, Crypto doesn't have to be here for this. Like, he could be around, you know what I'm saying? But like, I don't think he needs to be the saving grace in this. Again, I appreciate them throwing Crypto in the film, but that was just a small gripe for me. I think that was really.
I've heard that gripe from other people, so I don't think you're alone.
Okay.
In that thought process.
And I feel you because I enjoyed Crypto a lot, but I do agree that at times it almost feels like emotional like manipulation of the audience. Like, oh, this is a dog. People are gonna love a dog regardless, and just like throw him in there to just like almost, you know what I mean?
Did you hear that there was a test screening in which Crypto, instead of the nanites kind of not suffocating the dog, I guess, but like trapping him when Engineer was fighting with Crypto in the Fortress of Solitude.
Ultraman supposedly punched Crypto.
And in the test screenings, they got really low scores for that, so they took it out of the movie. So I could totally understand what you're saying in terms of emotional manipulation because nobody wants to see violence happening to a dog on screen, regardless of the dog having super abilities. So it's obviously it's something that could be a problem going forward. Really quick before we get to scores, two things. One, I want to go around and get each of you one quick thing. You can't really expand on it. One thing that we didn't get to touch upon that you loved that we didn't have a chance to speak on. The second thing is we talked about it a little bit. We've been going for a long time on this review. This movie sets up a lot of different things for the future of the DCU. As long as you guys would oblige me, I think that would be a great opportunity to do a separate video and discuss the future of what the ramifications of Superman has in terms of a lot of things I'm sure you guys are already aware of, like the Authority and Supergirl and Bizarro and Peacemaker and all that. So are you guys cool with that? We'll do a separate video for that.
Yeah.
Okay, awesome.
Yeah.
So there's a lot that we'll cover on that, guys. Don't worry. There's a lot of Superman content we'll have coming for you. But I'll start. One thing we didn't get to touch upon, the design of the Fortress of Solitude is fantastic. It is beautiful. It is unbelievable. And I loved every single scene that took place in that location because it's practical, which is incredible that so much of that was done practically. So that's my one thing that we didn't get to touch upon that I really loved. Vinny, anything off the top of your head?
One thing, I think I really covered all my favorite parts. One thing that I would like to say is I think the marketing was a little too intense for this. And I think that's why I felt not surprised by the film.
You wish you didn't see as much.
Yeah, because like the trailers and they kept releasing these clips, and it might be my fault for watching the clips, but at the same time, they were like almost impossible to avoid.
Yeah.
I have a Roku TV and they were like popping up like, oh, watch these Super Clip Man clips. And even on Instagram, advertising, all that. I saw like a lot of it. I knew the kaiju was coming. I knew Element Man, Metamorpho, right? I knew everything was coming. There was nothing of newness to me, right? And that's the one thing I want to touch on. Marketing, I wish they kind of chilled a little bit.
Yeah. Michael?
The one thing I would touch on, and I don't know, this could be a very unpopular opinion. I already touched on the score in this film. I think that it's amazing, and James Gunn always gets the best scores for his film. And we also know that he usually gets the best soundtracks for his film. This is the first time I think I'm 50-50 with this James Gunn soundtrack for the use of this film. I liked the songs that were used in different moments, and I think that it was effective. Like the song used, the fun song during like the Mr. Terrific fight. It was cool to see that, in that time. I understand like the whole last song, the whole punk rock thing being like the theme for this film, but I don't know if I would. I don't know. There's like little things that I think now to me the corniness come in like things like that where it's like Superman being like no like I am a punk rocker and then them playing that song is like it's like. So like that was just another sort of con, but it's like a 50-50 con because there were a lot of songs, and I feel like James Gunn is always known and good for his soundtracks. And I don't know, maybe that's also bias coming off of the love I have for the Guardians soundtracks. I feel like he hit everyone perfectly. I don't know. That's just it's such like a stupid critique.
It's not. There's
film.
not a
It's
lot
like,
of room for needle drops
right.
in this movie. It's a different vibe in terms of who the hero is in the context of what Superman represents. So I think it's harder for Gunn to have that, even internally, probably that creative freedom on how to do that with Superman.
Yeah.
Which maybe he'll get better at as he does more stories with Superman. But we'll see. I went positive. You guys went cons, but I do think it's still fun. Okay, scores. We've been talking for a long time. I'll start. I think it's a really, really good movie. It's a fantastic start to the DCU. I'm really excited to see all the things that they've set up in this film. There is not a single character introduced that I disliked, which is a great thing. It's very odd to say that in a blockbuster because it's usually not the case. But I'm excited to see where they go from here. I think it's a really good movie. It's one of the best of the year thus far for me. I'm going to give it an 8.5 out of 10. That is my score for Superman.
I loved it. I'm giving the same score, 8.5.
Nice. Michael?
Yeah, not too much to say. I agree. I love it. I'm also giving it an 8.5.
Whoa! 8.5 across the board. Perfect. So it's a unanimous score. You guys heard it here.
Yes.
We'd love to have your comments, your commentary in the comments. Be respectful. Don't be an asshole, but give this video a like if you guys can. Subscribe to us here at the Culture Wave Media Network. As I said, we're going to have a lot of other stuff and coverage for the DCU going forward. Peacemaker Season 2 comes out in August. I know I will definitely be covering that. I believe Vinny also will be covering it. Michael, I'm sure you'll also be covering it as well. So excited to talk about that with you guys when it comes. We have Supergirl coming out next year. We have Lanterns coming out on HBO next year. A lot of other things upcoming for the DCU and for comic books in general, comic movies in general, and superhero media, whatever you want to call it. But you guys can follow us and see all that other stuff on our social media pages as well. All that stuff is below me in the video. It's also in our YouTube description. We're everywhere you guys can find your content. We're there for you guys. And thank you for just being along the ride. And we're excited to see what else we get to talk about in this DC universe. But just signing off, I am Darian Scalamoni.
I am Vinny Albano.
I'm Michael Peniston.
And we'll see you guys next time.
This is The Culture.